Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Live Show 141, coming to you straight from Belarus on this historic night of June 15th, 2025. It's 8 p.m. here in Minsk, 6 p.m. in London, 1 p.m. in New York, and 4 a.m. in Sydney. You're watching us on Rumble, X, and YouTube, and trust me, you don't want to miss the second of this. Tonight, we're diving headfirst into the firestorm gripping the Middle East. Iran's earth-shaking four-wave missile and drone assault on Israel, a ferocious response to Israel's unprovoked attack just 2 days ago. The world is on the edge, and we're here to break it all down. Share the link, hit the thumbs up, and subscribe to our channels. Let's get into it. Folks, the Middle East is burning and the stakes couldn't be higher. On June 13, Israel launched an unprovoked assault on Iran, codenamed Operation Rising Lion, hitting nuclear sites, military bases, and civilian neighborhoods, killing 78 people, including top commanders and scientists. You can see our show on Friday about that. Iran called it a declaration of war, and they didn't hold back. Their response, Operation Severe Punishment, was a four-wave barrage of over 400 ballistic missiles and 150 drones that overwhelmed Israel's vaunted air defenses. Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Haifa cities lit up with the explosions. One woman dead, nearly 200 injured, and billions in damage. Iran's message was clear: mess with us and you'll pay the price. But it doesn't stop there. Iran uncovered a Mossad plot trucks packed with drones, smuggled right under their noses to sabotage their defenses.
از اینجا پرواز کردم.
And now they're threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz, the artery for 20% of the world's oil. If that happens, oil prices could skyrocket, economies could tank, and we're looking at a global crisis. The US is tangled up, intercepting missiles but preaching diplomacy, while Iran's allies, Hezbollah and the Houthis, are reaching to jump in. This isn't just a regional spat, it's a powder keg that could ignite a wider war. And tonight we're asking the tough questions. Why did Israel strike first? How did Iran pull off this devastating attack? What's the fallout if the Strait of Hormuz shuts down? And can the world stop this from spiraling out of control? Stick with us as we unpack the chaos, the consequences, and what comes next. You're not just watching history, you're witnessing it unfold. Let's dive in. Iran's retaliatory strike, a bold response to Israel's attack. On June 13, 2025, Iran launched an unprecedented retaliatory operation against Israel, unleashing four waves of ballistic missiles and drones that overwhelmed Israelis' air defenses. The attack, named Operation Severe Punishment, was a direct response to an unprovoked Israeli assault earlier that day, codenamed Operation Rising Lion, which targeted Iran's nuclear facilities, military bases and civilian infrastructure, killing senior commanders and scientists. Iran's discovery of Mossad-orchestrated drone operations within its borders and its consideration of closing the Strait of Hormuz has escalated tensions to a critical point, threatening a broader regional conflict with global repercussions. Let's look at the four waves of Iranian strikes, their targets, results, and far-reaching implications of these actions. Iran's four-wave missile and drone barrage, the targets and results. Iran's operation, executed by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, comprised of four waves of attacks on June 13 and early June 14, 2025, involving over 400 ballistic missiles and 150 drones launched from Tabriz, Kashan, Shiraz, and Efshan, using advanced Fatah-1 and Kezibah Shakan missiles with maneuvering warheads. Iran overwhelmed Israel's Iron Dome, David Sling, and Arrow 3 systems, allowing most of the missiles to penetrate defenses. Here's a detailed account of each wave based on the available reports. The first wave, June 13, 8 p.m. Israeli time. The targets were the initial wave targeted military installations, including Navatin Air Base in Negev, Tel Aviv Air Base, and areas near Tel Aviv hosting Mossad headquarters and Unit 8200 intelligence facilities. The IRGC aimed to saturate Israelis' air defenses with a combination of 120 ballistic missiles and drones targeting air control units and radar systems. The results were Israelis' air defences were overwhelmed, with most of the 120 missiles penetrating. A high-rise residential building in Tel Aviv was struck, killing one woman and injuring 34 civilians, while shrapnel damaged homes in Ramat Gan. Nevatim airbase suffered significant damage, with a hangar and runway hit, disrupting operations. Al Jazeera reported multiple impacts in central Tel Aviv, causing explosions and fires. Nationwide, sirens forced millions into shelters, and IDF struggled to respond as interception systems faltered. The second wave, June 13, 10:25 p.m. Israeli time. This wave hit Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and the Sea of Galilee region, including Tiberias, with 100 missiles targeting military centers, air bases, and defense infrastructure linked to Israelis' attack on Iran. The IRGC claimed strikes on Israel's air defense command centers to ensure subsequent waves faced less resistance. With defenses saturated, most missiles struck their targets. Explosions rocked Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, with residential areas hit. The Akalov Medical Center in Tel Aviv treated 15 people, including 2 in critical condition from shrapnel and 7 with moderate injuries. Emergency services reported 3 medics injured by glass fragments. The Guardian newspaper noted widespread damage in Ramat Gan, with burnt-out cars, collapsed buildings, and rescue teams overwhelmed at 5 impact sites at Gush Dan. Power outages affected parts of Tel Aviv. The third wave, June 13, 11:30 p.m. Israeli time. The third wave targeted northern Israel, Haifa, Galilee, Beersheba, and areas near Dimona, home of the Shimon Peres Negev Nuclear Research Center, with 110 missiles. The IRGC claimed strikes on Ramon Air Base and air defense systems, asserting it downed 2 Israeli jets. The wave aimed to stretch Israel's already strained defenses. Most missiles penetrated, causing extensive damage. Haifa reported multiple residential and commercial buildings hit, with fires spreading. Beersheba saw impacts on infrastructure, and unconfirmed reports suggest minor damage near Dimona, though the nuclear facility was unharmed. Social media posts described apocalyptic scenes in Haifa, with approximately 100 injuries nationwide, including 20 in serious condition. The IDF admitted its systems were overloaded, with interception rates dropping significantly. The fourth wave, June 14th, 1:10 a.m. Israeli time. The final wave targeted Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Haifa and Tiberias with 80 missiles focusing on military command centres, air bases and intelligence sites. The IRGC claimed strikes on facilities linked to Israel's nuclear program and air operations aiming to maximise disruption. With Israel's defence nearly collapsed, most missiles hit their targets. Tel Aviv saw multiple residential and commercial buildings struck, with fires and debris causing secondary damage. Jerusalem reported impacts near military sites, and Haifa faced further destruction. The Times of Israel noted at least 20 additional injuries, with medics overwhelmed. The IDF's Home Front Command allowed civilians to leave shelters, but urged proximity to protected areas. Anticipating further attacks, rescue operations continue amid widespread chaos. And the overall impact of Iran's four-wave attack killed one woman in Ramat Gan, injured approximately 150 to 200 people, 30 serious or critical condition, and caused extensive damage to residential, commercial and military infrastructure. Unlike previous attacks, most missiles penetrated Israel's defences, which were overwhelmed by the volume and sophistication of Iran's arsenal. The IDF reported limited assistance from US Navy destroyers, which fired a dozen interceptors but could not counter the barrage scale. Iran claimed devastating results, with the IRGC asserting it crippled Israel's air defense network. Though independent assessments are ongoing, the attacks disrupted power, water and communication systems in Tel Aviv and Haifa, with economic losses estimated in billions. Israel's unprovoked aggression, the catalyst. Israel's unprovoked attack on June 13 targeted Iran's nuclear sites at Natanz and Afshan, military bases and civilian areas, killing 78 people, including IRGC commandos, armed forces chief and nuclear scientists. Iran UN ambassador reported 320 injuries, mostly civilians, across 12 provinces. The International Atomic Energy confirmed damage to Natanz enrichment plant, raising contamination concerns. Israel's operation involved 200 aircraft and Mossad commandos exploiting Iran's weakened air defences, degraded by October 2024 strikes, drone strikes and cyber attacks. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claimed Iran could produce 15 nuclear bombs soon, a charge Iran denies, insisting its program is peaceful. The attack's timing, days before US-Iran nuclear talks in Oman, suggest an intent to sabotage diplomacy. Russia, China and Saudi Arabia condemn Israel's violation of sovereignty, with social media posts citing Israel's history of provocations, including the April 2024 bombing of Iran's Damascus consulate. Mossad's covert drone operation exposed. On June 14th, Iran's intelligence ministry seized vehicles, including a truck in Zanjan, a pickup in Kamarasha, and Toyota Hilux carrying drones linked to Mossad. These were part of a covert base near Tehran, used to strike Iranian missile launchers and air defense during Israel's attack. The operation involves smuggled precision weapons and commandos, enabling Israel air superiority. Iran's interception disrupted further attacks, exposing Israel's infiltration and fueling calls for revenge. The discovery strengthens Iran's narrative of resisting espionage, but risks internal purges, potentially destabilizing the regime. Iran's consideration of closing the Strait of Hormuz. Facing Israel's aggression, the Mossad's plot, Iran is contemplating closing off the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of the global oil flows, about 20 million barrels daily. IRGC Navy Chief Admiral Tangarisi affirmed Iran's capability to close the strait using anti-ship missiles, drones and speedboat swarms. Though Iran relies on the Strait for its oil exports, the scale of Israel's attack and the drone seizure may force Iran's hand, potentially through naval attacks, missile strikes, or mining to halt shipping through Iran and from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, and the UAE. So what are the ramifications of Iran's actions and potential strait closure? Iran's 4-wave missile strikes and Mossad drone seizure, regional escalation. The strikes, with most missiles penetrating, humiliated Israel's military, risking severe counterstrikes. The scale of the destruction, 1 dead, 150 to 200 injured, billions in damage, emboldened Iran's proxies Hezbollah and the Houthis. Hezbollah has pledged restraint, but the Houthis threaten a wider war, potentially involving Lebanon, Yemen, and Syria. Diplomatic fallout. Iran's cancellation of Oman nuclear talks and the threat to expose Israel's nuclear arsenal aim to shift global scrutiny. The UN Security Council's emergency meeting and the IAEA inspections may pressure Israel, but Iran's aggression response risks sanctions or isolation. The drone seizure bolsters Iran's case against Israel terrorism, but could alienate neutral states if Iran escalates further. The domestic impact of the drone seizure and successful strikes has galvanized Iranian hardliners, with protests in Qom and Tehran demanding action. However, purges of suspected collaborators and economic strain from potential sanctions could erode public support. The potential closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Global oil market disruption. A closure would spike oil prices beyond $100 per barrel, following the 7% jump to $74.23 for Brent oil crude on June 13th. China, Japan, India, and South Korea, reliant on 42% of Iran's oil, would face shortages. Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar, dependent on the strait, could face economic collapse. The crop price in oil will help Russia greatly. Economic blow to Iran. Iran's 65% oil revenue dependency means the closure would slash income, forcing subsidy cuts and risking unrest among its 91 million citizens, many frustrated with the regime. Military response. The US, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE would deploy minesweepers, escorts, or airstrikes to reopen the strait. Iran's actions could spark a broader war, with the US forces already engaged in missile interceptions. Iran's drills with Russia and China signal a counter-alliance, but both may oppose closure due to oil needs. The global economic fallout. A prolonged closure would disrupt 33 billion cubic meters of natural gas annually, doubling the impact of other choke points. Tanker insurance premiums would soar, shipping could halt, and global inflation and supply chains would suffer. Egypt's energy grid, relying on Israeli gas, has activated emergency measures. On the limited alternatives, Saudi Arabia and the UAE have partial pipeline bypasses, but Iraq and Kuwait lack options. Non-OPEC production and IEE reserves may mitigate losses, but not for long. And what are the strategic and regional dynamics? Iran's military, weakened by prior strikes and leadership losses, showed resilience, with its 2,000 ballistic missiles proving a potential threat. The US denying involvement in Israeli attacks, assisted with interceptions, but was overwhelmed, escalating entanglement fears. President Trump's push for talks and warnings of brutal consequences reflect US efforts to avoid war, but a strait closure could force action. Russia and China condemned Israel, with Putin offering mediation and China urging de-escalation. Iran's naval drills with both signal alignment, but their opposition to strait closure may restrain Iran. Jordan and Iraq intercepting Iran projectiles fill entanglement. So, Iran's wave missile and drone assault, with most missiles penetrating Israelis' overwhelmed defences, was a resounding response to Israel's unprovoked attack and Mossad's covert drone plot, killing 1, injuring 150 to 200, and causing billions in damage. The strikes expose Israel's vulnerabilities, reinforcing Iran's deterrence. The seizure of Mossad drones humiliated Israeli intelligence, but Iran's consideration of closing the Strait of Hormuz risks catastrophic fallout, global oil shocks, military retaliation, and domestic unrest. With nuclear talks derailed and proxies mobilized, the Middle East teeters on the edge of war. The UN and neutral powers must urgently broker de-escalation to prevent a conflict that could upend the global order. Time is running out. And here's some more video of some of the strikes in Israel and Iran over the last, today, before this show.
יוביל אותו אחורה בזמן שאנחנו מתרחקים מהנקודה. אבל כן, התמונות האלה מדברות בעד עצמן. הבית עכשיו שעולה באש זה בית מגורים שספג פגיעה ישירה, זה למעשה מרכז הפגיעה, וכפי שאת אמרת, הדבר הזה ברדיוס של מאות מטרים סביבנו יש סממני נזק. גם כאן מעניין הפצועים ממשיך לעלות, הרבה פצועי זכוכיות, הדף וחרדה. אנחנו מדווחים לפני זמן קצר שבעיר שבה אני נמצא באזור השפלה יש מוקד נוסף, אולי משבר ירות, אבל גם איזושהי שריפה שנגרמה, וגם שם כוחות ההצלה נמצאים ומנסים לקבל תמונת מצב. בעוד שנבקש מהדיר לצלם את הבניין שמסמולנו, בעוד שבבניין הזה מתקיימות פעולות חילוץ. בימים האחרונים נחשפנו לנוהל שנקרא נוהל הדממה.
Also, Israel estimates that the Ayatollah Khamenei has made a decision that Iran will go to war. Israel strikes into Iran and the air defences have been engaged all day. Iran's foreign minister announces that Iran will no longer share information or cooperate with the International Atomic Energy Agency.
Really important. But how do you know
so
that they have
denying that the top commanders have been killed? Are you denying that top commanders were killed?
Oh, so you mean what you're referring to basically is an attack, an act of aggression, that they suddenly fire missiles at civilian targets at apartment buildings and slaughter people in those apartment buildings, slaughtering whole families. For you, that's targeting. That's a really sophisticated act.
But if I can just ask, have military facilities been hit? Have nuclear facilities been hit?
One of the buildings that had some of these commanders, one or two of these commanders, was a large apartment building where they killed everyone, 60 people, 20 children. That's not important for people like you, but that's important for people like us. For you, people like you who support ethno-supremacism and the chosen people being able to slaughter and exterminate Palestinians.
Professor Marandi, I'm just trying to get the perspective. We're trying to give you airtime so that you can give us the Iranian perspective on this. And we want to know, and I want to understand, Iran's position here. Will you come to the negotiating table now? Donald Trump, after these series of airstrikes and this attack was launched, called on Iran to come back to the negotiating table. As the spokesperson of the regime, or as someone who worked closely with the negotiating team, do you believe they will come to the negotiating table now?
Well, your regime should know, and your news agency or your TV channel should know better. We were at the negotiating table. It was Trump that conspired with Netanyahu to attack Iran. This is how you twist the truth. You shouldn't invite me because you're easily exposed. Iran was negotiating. Initially, Trump had one position, and so did Witkoff. And then they flipped and said no enrichment. And then they continued the negotiations. And the night before the attack, Trump said that we don't want war. And then after the attack, he said, we're all for it. And you're saying Iran? Is Iran going to come back to the negotiating table? The audacity. Come on. Be a bit, show at least a bit of integrity. A bit of integrity will help.
Okay. Okay, Professor Marandi, thanks again for joining us here on the program.
And now 10 questions from our viewers. Why did Iran launch such a massive 4-wave missile and drone attack on Israel? Well, the answer, folks, Iran's attack on June 13th, 2025 was a direct response to what they called an unprovoked Israeli assault on their country earlier that day. Israel's operation, dubbed Operation Rising Lion, hit Iran's nuclear facilities, military bases and even civilian areas, killing 78 people, including top commanders and nuclear scientists. Iran saw this as a declaration of war, and the supreme leader vowed a crushing response. So Iran launched Operation Severe Punishment, firing over 400 ballistic missiles and 150 drones in 4 waves to hit back at Israel's military and cities like Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. This just wasn't about retaliation, it was Iran showing the world that they won't sit back after such a bold attack. They wanted to restore their deterrence and prove they can strike deep into Israel, especially after their air defences were weakened by early Israeli strikes and cyber attacks. How did Israel's unprovoked attack on Iran trigger this escalation? Let's break this down, viewers. On June 13, Israel launched a massive unprovoked attack on Iran, targeting their nuclear sites, military bases, and even residential areas. They killed people, including key figures in the Iranian armed forces, and caused over 320 injuries, and also killed scientists. Iran's calling this violation of their sovereignty, and they're not wrong. Israel struck without warning, claiming Iran was days away from building 15 nuclear bombs, which Netanyahu's been saying since the 80s. Iran denies this, saying their nuclear program is peaceful. The timing is suspicious too, coming right before the US-Iran nuclear talks in Oman. Many, including Russia and China, see this as Israel trying to sabotage diplomacy. Iran has no choice but to respond forcefully to show that they won't be bullied, especially after Israel's history of provocations, like bombing Iran's Damascus consulate in 2024. This was the spark that lit the fuse. What exactly happened during Iran's 4 waves of strikes, and how badly was Israel hit? Here's the play-by-play, folks. Iran's attack came in 4 waves, starting June 13 at 8 p.m. Israeli time. The first wave hit military sites like Nevatin Air Base and areas near Tel Aviv's Mossad headquarters with 120 missiles and drones. A high-rise in Tel Aviv was struck, killing 1 woman and injuring 34. The second wave at 10:25 p.m. targeted Tel Aviv, Jerusalem and Tiberias, hitting residential areas and causing 15 injuries, some critical. The third wave at 11:30 p.m. struck Haifa, Beersheba and near Damon's nuclear facility, with 100 injuries reported. The fourth wave at 1:10 a.m. on June 14 pounded Tel Aviv and Haifa again, adding 20 more injuries. In total, 1 person died, 150 to 200 were injured, and billions in damage hit homes, businesses and military sites. Most of Iran's missiles got through, overwhelming Israel's defences, which left cities like Tel Aviv and Haifa reeling with fires, power outages and chaos. Why were Israeli air defences overwhelmed, allowing most of Iran's missiles to get through? The answer is, this is a big deal, viewers. Israel's air defence, think Iron Dome, David Sling and Arrow 3, are some of the best in the world, but Iran's attack was on another level. They fired over 400 advanced missiles, including Fatah 1 and Kareba Shekan, which can maneuver to dodge interceptors. Iran used a saturation strategy, launching missiles and drones in 4 rapid waves to overload Israeli systems. The sheer volume, 120 missiles in the first wave, alone exhausted interceptors and confused radar. Israel's defences were already stretched from prior conflicts, and the US Navy's dozen interceptors couldn't keep up either. Reports say interception rates plummeted, letting most missiles hit their targets. This exposed vulnerabilities in Israelis' multi-layered defences, causing widespread damage and shaking public confidence. Iran proved that they could punch through, which changes the game in this conflict. What's the significance of Iran's discovery of Mossad's covert drone operation? The answer is, this is a straight out of a spy thriller, folks. On June 14th, Iran's intelligence ministry busted a Mossad operation, seizing vehicles like a Toyota Hilux and a truck in Sows, packed with drones. These were part of a covert Mossad base near Tehran, set up to hit Israeli missile launches and air defences during Israeli attacks. Mossad had smuggled precision weapons and commandos into Iran over the years, helping Israeli jets dominate the skies. Iran's interception stopped further attacks and exposed Israeli deep infiltration, which is a huge embarrassment for Mossad. For Iran, it's a propaganda win, fueling their narrative of fighting Israel terrorism. but it's a double-edged sword. Expect Iran to crack down on its suspected collaborators, which could spark internal unrest. This discovery shows how far Israel's willing to go and why Iran's so determined to hit back. And another sub-question is, did Israel help Ukraine in Operation Spiderweb? Iran considering closing the Strait of Hormuz, and what would that mean? The answer is, here's where things get really serious, viewers. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow waterway where 20% of the world's oil, 20 million barrels a day, passes through. Iran's Navy chief says they can close it with missiles, drones and speedboats. Why now? Israel's attack and the Mossad drone plot pushed Iran to the edge. They're considering this to deter further aggression and show that they can hit the world where it hurts. Closing the strait would choke off oil from Iran, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq and UAE, sparking global oil prices and disrupting economies. It might help Russia with higher prices, of course. For Iran, it's a high-stakes move. They rely on the strait for their own oil exports, which fund 65% of their budget. It's a signal they're ready to escalate, but it could backfire, inviting military retaliation and hurting their own people. How could the closure of the Strait of Hormuz impact the global economy? The answer, buckle up, folks, this could be a global game changer. If Iran closes the straits, oil prices could soar past $100 a barrel, up from the $74.23 after Israel's attack. Countries like China, Japan, India and South Korea, which buy 42% of Iran's oil, would face shortages, driving up fuel and food prices. Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain and Qatar, who ship all their trade through the strait, could be paralysed. The ripple effect, global inflation, supply chain chaos and higher costs for everything from gas to groceries. And gas in the US will go up to more than $10 a gallon. It'll also disrupt 33 billion cubic meters of natural gas exports, doubling the impact of other choke points like Gibraltar. Shipping companies might halt traffic and tanker insurance would skyrocket. Saudi Arabia and the UAE have some pipeline bypasses, but they're not enough. The world economy could take a massive hit, and places like Egypt, reliant on regional gas, are already scrambling. What role did the US play in this conflict, and why are they involved? The answer is the US is walking a tightrope here, viewers. They deny any direct role in Israel's attack on Iran, but they helped intercept some of Iran's missiles, firing a dozen interceptors from Navy destroyers. Plus, they supply Israel with all their weapons. The theory goes that Trump was just playing along about diplomacy to lull Iran into a sense of complacency so Israel could attack. Why the US has a long-standing alliance with Israel and sees Iran's nuclear program as a threat. President Trump's been pushing for a nuclear deal with Iran, even giving them a 60-day ultimatum to negotiate. Negotiate or we'll shoot you in the head. But Israel's attack derailed that. The US is also worried about Iran's 2,000 ballistic missiles and their proxies like Hezbollah causing havoc. By assisting Israel, the US risks getting dragged into a wider war, especially if Iran closes the Straits of Hormuz. They're involved to protect their interest oil flow, regional stability and keeping Iran in check, but it's a risky move that could pull them deeper into the mess. How are Iran's Israels, like Hezbollah and Houthis, responding to this crisis? The answer is Iran's not alone in this fight, folks. Their allies like Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen are fired up. Hezbollah, a powerful militia, has pledged support but is holding back for now, likely to avoid dragging Lebanon into an all-out war. The Houthis, though more vocal, threatening a regional war if Israel keeps attacking Iran. They've got a track record of hitting Saudi oil facilities and could target Israel or its allies. These groups are part of Iran's axis of resistance, designed to counter Israel and the US. If they join the fight, we could see attacks in Lebanon, Yemen, or even Syria, spreading the conflict. For now, they're in wait-and-see mode, but further Israel strikes could unleash them, turning this into a multi-front war with devastating consequences. What can the international community do to prevent this from spiraling into a full-scale war? The answer is we're at a crossroads, viewers, and the world needs to step up. The UN Security Council is holding an emergency meeting, and the IAEA is inspecting Iran's damaged nuclear sites. Those are good starts. Neutral powers like Russia, which offered mediation, and China, urging de-escalation, could broker talks to cool things down. The US needs to push Israel to halt further strikes and get Iran back to the nuclear negotiating table, maybe through back channels Oman. But so far, Iran has refused. Sanctions or military threats won't work. They'll only escalate things. The international community must also warn Iran against closing the Strait of Hormuz, offering economic incentives to keep it open. More importantly, all sides need to ceasefire and let tempers cool. If we don't act fast, with Iranian proxies ready and Israeli gearing up, this could spiral into a war that engulfs the region and beyond. And that was 10 viewer questions that were sent in to us, and thank you for that. They were excellent questions. I hope I answered them for you. Now, let's get on to the next section of the show. Iran's naive gamble, a nation trapped in a storm. Iran's leadership has been perilously naive, failing to heed the lessons etched in the blood-soaked annals of recent history. The ghosts of Saddam Hussein in Iraq and Muammar Gaddafi in Libya loom large. Both men were seduced by the siren songs of Western diplomacy, lulled into complacency by Machiavellian promises of reconciliation, only to meet their demise at the hands of those they foolishly trusted. Saddam, swayed by assurances of sanctions relief, and Gaddafi, persuaded to abandon his nuclear ambitions, both fell victim to the same predatory playbook. Like their fallen counterparts, Tehran's rulers have been ensnared by a similar delusion, believing that diplomatic overtures and indirect negotiations could shield them from the predatory instincts of their adversaries. The covert nuclear talks in Oman, shrouded in secrecy and hailed as a pathway to de-escalation, were taken with grave seriousness in Tehran. Iran's civilian and military elites, from the corridors of the Foreign Ministry to the war rooms of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, allow themselves to be lulled into a false sense of security. They believe that the measured rhetoric, legalistic posturing, and the cautious concessions could temper the ambitions of their foes, chiefly Israel and its Western allies. But this was a trap, a carefully orchestrated illusion designed to lower Iran's guard. When the moment came, they were caught not just unprepared, but literally asleep, their defences pierced by surgical precision of Israeli strikes and cyber attacks that targeted critical infrastructure and personnel. Tehran is now awakening to the brutal truth in the lawlessness jungle of international politics. Diplomacy is a hollow instrument. The endless committees, the careful worded letters of the United Nations, the ritualistic statements to the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, and the pomp of ministerial summits all are meaningless when confronted by the raw calculus of power. Iran's leaders have learnt the hard way that their adversaries do not play by the rules of civilized discourse. Instead, they operate by the primal code of survival, where deception and force reign supreme. The veneer of international law and multilateral institutions offer no protection against those who wield power without restraint. Compounding their naivety, Iran's leadership made a catastrophic misstep by granting the IAEA access to the most sensitive strategic sites. Under the guise of transparency, they opened the door to proverbial spies, operatives who, under the cover of international inspections, miraculously gathered the intelligence needed to orchestrate devastating Israeli attacks. This was a blunder of historic proportions, one that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the DPRK, with its ironclad paranoia and refusal to entertain foreign inspectors, would never have committed. North Korea's leaders, hardened by decades of isolation and unrelenting hostility, understand that survival demands vigilance, not trust. Iran, by contrast, has paid a steep price for its misguided faith in the international system, exposing its vulnerabilities to those who seek its destruction. The assassination of Ali Shamakhani a towering figure in Iran's political and military establishment, marks a devastating blow to the Islamic Republic. As a close advisor to the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and Iran's chief nuclear negotiator, Shamakhani wielded unparalleled influence over the IRGC, the intelligence apparatus, and the nation's nuclear strategy. His elimination is not merely a tactical setback, but a symbolic decapitation of Iran's strategic core, signaling to Tehran's enemies that no one, no matter how powerful, is beyond reach. The loss of such a figure reverberates through the halls of power, sowing fear and uncertainty as time when unity and resolve are desperately needed. It underscores the precision and audacity of Israeli campaigns to dismantle Iran's leadership and nuclear ambitions. So the world now watches as Iran stands at a perilous crossroads, caught in the storm of its own making. The options before Tehran are stark and unforgiving. The first option, Iran could unleash a devastating counterstrike against those it deems genocidal psychopaths, a bold but reckless move that risks plunging the region into all-out war with catastrophic consequences for all involved. The second option, it could race to assemble a nuclear weapon, crossing the threshold from ambiguity to deterrence in a bid to secure its survival. This path, however, invites preemptive strikes and global commendation, with no guarantee of success given that the intense scrutiny on Iran's nuclear program. The third option is the most humiliating, capitulation. To bend the knee would mean not only the emasculation of the regime, but its eventual collapse, as internal dissent and external pressures converge to usher in regime change, much as they did in Iraq and Libya. Yet the storm involves us all. The ripple effects of Iran's predicament extend far beyond its borders, threatening to destabilize an already volatile region. A miscalculation by Tehran could ignite a broader conflict, drawing in global powers and reshaping the geopolitical landscape. For the Islamic Republic, the stakes could not be higher. To survive, Iran must shed its naivety and embrace the ruthless pragmatism of its adversaries. The lessons of Saddam and Gaddafi are clear. In the jungle, only the cunning and the resolute endure. Whether Iran can rise to this challenge or succumb to its forces arrayed against it remains an open question, but the clock is ticking and the world is watching. And this is a reckoning for Iran and the world. Iran's current crisis is a stark reminder of the unforgiving nature of global power politics. The Islamic Republic's naive trust in diplomacy and international institutions have left it exposed, its leadership decimated, and its strategic options dwindling. The assassinations, the strikes, and the intelligence failures are not just blows to Iran, but warnings to any other nation that dares to challenge the prevailing order without the means to defend itself. As Tehran grapples with its next move, the world braces for the consequences. Whether Iran chooses retaliation, nuclear escalation, or surrender, the outcome will reverberate across the Middle East and beyond, shaping the future of the region already teetering on the edge. For Iran, this is a moment of reckoning, a test of its resolve, its ingenuity, and its ability to learn from the past before it becomes yet another cautionary tale in the annals of history. Israel's nuclear threat, Dugan's bombshell revelation. Alright folks, buckle up for a segment that's going to send chills down your spine. We're diving into a terrifying escalation in this Middle East crisis, and it's coming straight from the Russian philosopher Alexander Dugin, who's dropped an absolute bombshell about Israel's doomsday plan. If Israel's Operation Rising Lion, their unprovoked attack on Iran, fails, they're threatening something called Samson's Choice. What is that? Dugan say it's a nuclear apocalypse, direct nuclear strikes on Iran and Yemen, and if push comes to shove, detonating dirty bombs inside Israel itself for self-destruction. Yes, you heard it right. Israel's ready to go scorched earth, even on their own soil. But it even gets worse. Israeli ministers are also threatening nuclear attacks on European capitals. Think London, Paris, Berlin, if EU countries keep supporting a two-state solution or recognising Palestine, which, let's be honest, they're already doing. Dugan points out that Israel's shown they mean business. They've planted cells in Iran for Rising Lion, taking out military leaders, scientists and nuclear sites. They've sabotaged equipment in Lebanon and reportedly eliminated Hezbollah's Nasrallah under their top brass. If they're going this far, Dugan asks, what kind of chaos are they prepared in other countries? The possibilities are unthinkable. Now let's talk about the global fallout, because this is where it hits home. Dugan warns that Samsung's choice could be the end game, an apocalypse that drags everybody down. In the US, the MAGA movement is splitting wide open. Most Trump supporters are dead set against joining Israel's war with Iran, leaving only neocons like Lindsey Graham beating the war drums. The American people, they're done with it, and they're loud about it. Even Elon Musk on his platform X, the heart of MAGA, is dropping subtle hints he's against this war, though he's playing it careful. Meanwhile, the US is spiraling into chaos. Representatives tried to the Democratic Party's No Kings campaign have turned to political terror. Just today, one of the organisers gunned down 2 Minnesota senators and their families in cold blood. Protesters are hitting the streets with signs reading 8647, code for assassinating the 47th president. Folks, this is a civil war territory, and it's unfolding right now. And it's not just the US. On the global stage, Pakistan's drawn the red line. If Israel launches a nuclear attack on Iran, Islamabad will hit back with their own nukes. Even Saudi Arabia, in a stunning twist, is openly backing Iran. This isn't just a regional conflict anymore. It's a global powder keg. Dugan's warning is clear. Operation Samson's Choice could be the spark that sets the world ablaze. We're staring down the barrel of a nuclear nightmare, and the clock is ticking. Stay with us. And that's a wrap for Live Show 141, folks, broadcasting from Belarus on this critical night of June 15th, 2025. We've torn into the chaos shaking the Middle East, Iran's 4-wave missile and drone onslaught that overwhelmed Israelis' defences, a fierce retaliation to Israel's unprovoked attack just 2 days ago. We've exposed Mossad's covert drone plot, Iran's threat to choke off the Strait of Hormuz, and the global stakes that could send oil prices soaring and economies reeling. From Tel Aviv's shattered streets to the spectre of a wider war with Hezbollah and the Houthis, one thing's clear: the world is teetering on a knife edge. The UN, the US, Russia and China, they've got to step up and pull us back from the brink, or we're all going to be paying the price. Also tonight we covered how Iran was being naive about diplomacy with the West and how it should be more like North Korea or will end up like Iraq and Libya. And also Alexander Dugan's warning of Israel's Samson's Choice. And we've also answered 10 questions from our viewers who sent those questions in earlier today. Thanks for that. Send your questions in anytime before the next show and I'll answer them. Oh, also, did you see the 250th anniversary of the US Army parade yesterday? No? Here's some of that.
Gained the nickname Bayonet Division during their deployment to Korea in June of 1950. At Incheon Landing and during the liberation of Seoul, they were credited with plunging the bayonet into the heart of the enemy, with 13 members of the division receiving the Medal of Honor. The 7th enables and sustains the combat readiness of 2 Stryker Brigade combat teams and a combat aviation brigade.
And as a comparison, let's look at the one in Minsk on May 9th.
Главе парадного расчета полковник Дмитрий. Боевое знамя военной академии Республики Беларусь. Под ним чеканит шаг парадный расчет офицеров факультета Генерального штаба военного вуза. Впереди расчета начальник академии генерал-майор Андрей Горбатенко.
Also, this came in today from London, and the usual suspects were involved in this. The UK as a country is over. So folks, stay vigilant, keep asking questions, and don't let the headlines drown out the truth. Thank you for joining us tonight on Rumble, X and YouTube. Share this video link, smash the thumbs up and subscribe to our channels to stay ahead of the curve. As you can see, I'm still not in the studio as I'm still near the Ukraine border, and you'll find out why soon. We're back soon with more hard-hitting truth. Until then, this is me signing off from Belarus. Stay safe, stay informed, and let's keep the conversation going. Bye.